Ladies and gentlemen, this is the best part of my day, the best part of my week, the best part of my year, because I get to talk college football as part of the Nuts and Bolts College Football Forecast. I guess I am your head football meteorologist, joined by the lovely, the talented, and unexpectedly vicious young Mr. Brock Vieira. Uh, this is an interesting week. So we've had a few weeks to kind of let teams settle in. Tell me what things you sort of picked up and learned, and what things you still want to learn about this college football season.
Very unpredictable to say the least. We always talk about the big boys at the top, the Georgias, the Alabamas, and yes, they're still going to be there. But Texas gave Alabama a scare and a run for their money. That's just
More than a scare. A couple of very iffy calls saved Alabama in that game.
so very iffy calls, especially the one at the end of the game, clearly misholding the roughing the passer call. If Queen Errors doesn't go down, completely different ball game, right? It completely changed the trajectory of the college football season. Alongside the fact that the dominant force in the SEC still is dominant, but the dominating players have now kind of shifted. Obviously, A&M went down. Tennessee had a really big victory on the road at Pitt. We really don't know where this is going to be. And then with conference realignment coming up, it really is the Wild West right now, and I absolutely love it.
I can't remember what movie it is, but there's a scene where a child is like out on the lawn, something's on fire, and they say, "Anarchy, anarchy." I don't even know what that means, but I love it. And that is what may be coming. We sort of just automatically assume certain programs are good. People automatically assume Notre Dame is good for reasons I've never quite fully understood, except okay, I know tradition and the helmets and whatever. And some other programs get an automatic credit. Now, Alabama, to its credit, is usually good every year. So people are somewhat right to sort of push them up. But here's what I noticed even a couple of years ago. Alabama's defenses, which used to be just choke you out, kill you defenses, were still good defenses, but they were no longer defenses that just shut down good teams, good offense. And even last year, good defense, but not like Georgia's defense.
No.
And this year, it's just a hunch, just a feeling. I think Alabama's going to lose at least one surprising game, like a game that people don't circle as a possible loss, but to a team that knows how to get big plays, because that's how I think you beat this Alabama team. You're not going to beat them 4 and 5 yards, the occasional screen pass, running up the middle, running off tackle, inside zone, outside zone, speed option with your quarterback, screen pass, screen pass. I think you beat this Alabama team by getting maybe popping a couple of big runs off, maybe a draw where it's a long like a 3rd and 11. You're thinking pass, and somebody pops a big run, and then you get some deep shots on them. I think their secondary is not as good as people. I mean, Keelan Ringo's talented, but I don't think it's as a group a vintage Alabama secondary. I might be proven wrong, but I think it's not, and I'll be watching closely. I think that I'm not ready to pass the mantle to Georgia, but Georgia still looks like the class of the SEC so far to me. So far. And to me, the excitement is finding that third team, right? That team that at least throws a scare, well, not named Texas, that throws a scare into either one of the other two that we just talked about, either Alabama or Georgia. And I know it's been popular, like leave the ACC for dead. I think that I think I think it's wrong to leave them for dead. I don't know why people are sleeping a bit on certain teams in the conference. Now, it's not a great ACC across the board, but Clemson is going to snooze its way to maybe running the table. They may never look great, but they have so much talent, so much that I don't. It's hard to identify a loss for them. I'm excited about what Syracuse has a chance to do against a very good Purdue team. Syracuse has quietly improved every year over the past couple of years. They have a lot of team speed, not a great downfield passing attack, but a lot of team speed, and they can make some things happen. Miami, I'm not saying I'll be shocked if they don't beat Texas A&M, but I'll be mildly surprised if they don't beat Texas A&M. So I think that people are somewhat, at least the top tier of the ACC, I think, is probably a little better than most people think.
Yeah, I agree with that, Suspect. I agree with everything you just said. I go back to the what year was it? Was it the 2018 national championship, Clemson versus Alabama, where Trevor Lawrence blew them out? After that point, their defense hasn't been to the standard for which we have been accustomed to at Alabama. The multiple first-round picks, the multiple NFL stars on that defense. And then you look at this year, they do have Will Anderson, who's an absolute animal. In my opinion, should be the first overall pick if a team doesn't go quarterback. I think you should go Will Anderson anyway because he's a game wrecker. But besides that, you look at their roster. There's Henry To'oTo'o, the Kool-Aid McKinstry, some ballers, but not really of that stature for which you are accustomed to with the Nick Saban defense. So I agree with that assessment too. If you look at the offensive side of the ball, they're not that old pounding running game of years past with those great tailbacks like the Mark Ingrams, the Trent Richardsons, the Derrick Henrys, so on and so forth. They really turn into more of a passing offense, which is great, but there are times for which that has shown that has come back to bite them in the behind. Now, I still think Alabama is the class of the SEC. I cannot put Georgia at the top until Georgia consistently beats Alabama. I've set up one of my first tweets I ever made that got a lot of hate was that if Georgia loses to Alabama, either in the SEC championship or in the national championship game, that they should look to move on from Kirby Smart. And all right, let me explain myself. Had Georgia lost to Alabama in the national championship, first of all, Kirby Smart has done everything correct. I want to make that very clear. And he deserves a lifetime extension at Georgia, no doubt, for winning the national championship. Had he lost the national championship, which was a very distinct possibility halfway throughout that game, he would have lost it with John Mechie never even being on that field. Jameson Williams tearing his ACL in the first quarter. So Alabama would have been down both their 1 and 2 wide receivers. They did not have a starting run game, and you had like 5 or 6 first rounders on that defense. If you cannot beat Nick Saban at that point, Georgia really needed to look at, like, is this the dude that can get us over the hill? Or are we just going to suffer being so close for a long time like how we did with Mark Richt? All respect to Mark Richt. That's why I made that tweet. And it did deserve the hate it got, but I still stand by it. If he didn't beat Alabama, those questions should have had to been asked. Now, the question is now, can he continuously beat Alabama? I don't know that, and until he does, I still say Alabama is the top. They're the top of the industry. They're the Cadillac of the SEC. With that being said, we always talk about who's that third team to kind of come up and maybe throw a wrench in the system. For a second, it looked like Florida with Billy Napier. They still got a while to go. Everyone's high in Kentucky. I'm not. I'm gonna throw something out there. I think it's Tennessee. Here's why. Tennessee plays in the SEC East, which is a heck of a lot easier to win than the SEC West. Secondly, they have an offense that can get those big plays on a fairly consistent basis. The only question is, will they be able to turn it up on the day? And I'm going to put my money that there is no other team in the SEC that can put up plus 40, plus 50 points on an Alabama defense besides maybe even Georgia and them. And that's why I have them being the number 3 team in the SEC. When you look at the ACC, yes, Clemson's going to walk their way to an ACC title and possibly a college football playoff spot. I think Miami has a big test this week, and to me, Miami should be favored. There's no reason Texas A&M and Max Johnson, who's just been named starting quarterback, should have any confidence that they should win that game. They just lost to Appalachian State, who just ran the ball all over them. What does Miami seem to do very well? What does Mario Cristobal seem to do very well? Run the ball on people. So if Miami doesn't win, to me, it's a letdown for them, and it's kind of this game is going to see where the ACC is currently in terms of conference prestige.
I agree with every single one of those statements, except for some of the more controversial ones. As always, I think that you have to give people a little longer to settle into a program and build. Obviously, you are younger than I am. I remember when coaches, Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden, Beamer, those guys got several years. Now I know things have changed, but got several years to establish their program before they started turning around and winning. I think some of why some of these programs are so far down is because they got into a hamster wheel situation where they were jettisoning coaches every 2 or 3 years. And that does two things. One is it makes coaches less likely to want to take the job, but also now the talent that was recruited to play in this system, it doesn't fit that system. And now you spend at least 1 year with mismatches between talent and system, unless you find someone who runs virtually the exact same system. I understand the desire to knock off Saban's Alabama, which gets done every 4 or 5 years. It seems like somebody beats them every 4 or 5 years, but doing it consistently seems like a not impossible, but unrealistic thing, I think, to expect. Because if somehow his team doesn't end up national champions, two things happen. One is he goes even harder at everything, recruiting, jumping down his coaches' throats, jumping down his players' throats, jumping down his own throat, probably knowing Nick Saban. So there's this expectation, right? We talk about the standard. They have set the standard, the bar, whatever it is, as high as you can't set it higher, right? They've set it. They expect to win a national championship every year. Nobody else truly, they say it, but nobody else truly has that expectation every year. There are teams that know they should contend every year. Now, Georgia might be making that move from we should contend every year to we should win every year. And this is maybe that year that decides that. If they win back to back, now they're in that Clemson, Alabama, and now Georgia, is now the three that literally think we should win this thing every year. Everyone else wants to win it, thinks about winning, might have a chance to win, but they don't truly expect to win the national championship every year. Would Harbaugh love to win it? Yes. In his heart of hearts, does he truly believe every year that he's been there at Michigan they were going to the national championship? I don't think so.
Probably. He's pretty delusional.
He's probably the next guy who's closest to truly believing. Right. Yeah, right. Harbaugh would love to. And if he does, once again, they'll build a statue to him or something. But Ryan Day is the other coach that I think is right there on the cusp of saying there's no excuse. There's no reason we shouldn't be national champions every year. They also have a hump to get over, as we talked about. And we'll see if that happens. Let's talk games. Give me your top 5 games for this week.
So I already mentioned the Miami at Texas A&M. Big test for both teams. One, A&M has basically shot any chance of going to the college football playoffs to hell at this point, especially when they play in the SEC West. They lose this game, a lot of questions are going to be raised about the program and these so-called top recruiting classes that they have. Obviously, they started Max Johnson at quarterback. Big year for him, obviously transferring from LSU to Texas A&M. Was that the right move for him? Only time will tell. For the other side, Mario Cristobal, he's building something strong at Miami, but the biggest criticism he's always faced was his underutilization of great quarterbacks, a.k.a. Justin Herbert. Had that man for, 4 years or something like that? Or how long was Cristobal as the head coach? Maybe 2 or 3 as head coach. Did win a Pac-12 championship, did win a Rose Bowl, never made a college football playoff, and then you see what he's done in the NFL. Will this running attack stifle Tyler Van Dyke to a point where he's ineffective? Or will this supplement him and complement him well enough to be a top quarterback? This is a game to see where he's at right now. The other game I'm looking forward to is BYU traveling up to Eugene, Oregon to play the Oregon Ducks. Oregon is in this weird spot right now with Dan Lanning. They don't know who is their quarterback of the future at this moment. BYU just knocked off Baylor. This could be a big game if they want to make the college football playoffs. Oklahoma versus Nebraska. I expect this to be a blowout, but I just love the tradition of this game. Going back to those days of the old Big 12 and those great big padded monsters that used to be on the field. Of course, you think about guys like Brian Bosworth and Tommy Frazier and all those legends of past days. I want to see how Nebraska rebounds after the Scott Frost firing. This is the first sign to see if OU is for real under Brent Venables. Next one is Fresno State at USC. Passing attack on both sides. We can see how Jake Haener kind of lines up against NFL talent, judging where he'll fall in the draft. We'll see how well Caleb Williams and his offense adjust to a little bit higher competition. I say Stanford and Fresno State are fairly close So we'll see if they can continue that momentum. And then the last game I have is Georgia versus South Carolina. In years past, when Steve Spurrier was there, South Carolina would give Georgia all types of fits. I'm a big believer in Shane Beamer. I have the Bulldogs on upset alert. I expect the Gamecocks to play hard. I do expect Georgia to win, but I think this game is going to be a lot closer than we think.
Those are some awesome selections. I'm going to start with a game that is very interesting to me, and that's Auburn versus Penn State at Auburn. Now, Penn State is one of those teams where I always predict higher for them than most people in terms of wins. And then they scare the living daylights out of me where I think, oh God, what did I do saying they were going to be 9-3 this year? And then they somehow go 9-3. Well, most years at least. They don't look good doing it though. There's something about that team. In part, it's their quarterback situation. I said to somebody, and I can't remember who it was. I said, clutch doesn't mean you're good. Clutch just means you're as good as you can be at the right time. And something about Mr. Sean Clifford, he may not be good, but for whatever reason, as good as he can be, he saves for that moment, like when he has to be, right? He is as good as he can be when he has to be. Almost magically, sometimes it seems, he will stink it up for 3 quarters, 3.5, 3 3/3, right? Or not 3 2/3 sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this guy? He'll throw some of the most amazingly, mind-meltingly, spellbindingly questionable interceptions you've ever seen, and then come up with 2 dagger throws and a bounce off 3 linebackers run to keep a drive going and score late to win a game. He may not take all that against Auburn. Auburn was once, admittedly kind of the little brother, but they were the little brother for many years and sometimes would beat the big brother, just like Michigan State, Michigan, in the SEC West. Auburn was always right there in that trail position behind Alabama. And if Alabama slipped up, boom, right there on them. And for whatever reason, they have not been quite in that position very recently. This is a watershed game for Auburn. If Auburn can win this game, even though it's at home, Auburn's giving 3, and the over-under is 46. I might bet both the over and take Penn State, since Penn State's getting 3. I just have a feeling that Penn State's going to find a way to win that game, and I could be proven wrong. And if I am proven wrong, hats off to Auburn. I think that this is one of those games that will let us know if they are any good. And then another game that really fascinates and interests me is Michigan State at Washington. So Michigan State may be the best program in the Big Ten, but once again, we don't know that yet. They are right now at the moment giving 3.5 points to Washington, even though they're playing at Washington. And the over-under on that one's 56.5. I would probably bet the under. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. And I think Michigan State covers the 3.5, but I think Washington gives them a good fight. And every once in a while you see a game that's like, have these 2 programs ever played each other before? I know those 2 have, though not super recently, I don't think. Unless, do they have a home and home going? Maybe they do, but I don't think so. Or maybe they do go on.
Have they played each other before?
That's what I'm thinking. I think they have, but I don't think it's super recently.
I know Michigan and Washington have the Rose Bowl, but I don't ever remember Michigan State playing.
I think they have, but not recently. I think it goes back to the days when Don James was at Washington, and maybe Perlis was at Michigan State. It goes back long before you were even a gleam in your mother's eye, Mr. Vieira. But I do believe they played before, but not recently. I'll go to the next game. I think these 2 teams, unless they met in a bowl game, they have never played before. Nevada and Iowa. I'm trying to think if they've ever played. If they have, I don't remember it. But this is going to be a fascinating contrast in styles. Iowa is one of those teams that is playing in a time warp, right? Fullbacks, tight ends, running the ball, and not just running the ball, but running the ball in a very in a way that your grandfather would recognize running the ball. And then on top of that, when they do throw the ball, it is once again very much under center, 3-5-7. A lot of times with play action involved. It's a very, like I said, sort of traditional. They're one of the few teams that really looks like themselves, similar to the way they would have a generation ago. So that'll be interesting to see. And then obviously Nevada is at the other end of the spectrum. Nevada's the school where Chris Alt essentially created the pistol attack. And though they don't use it as much nowadays, they still have familiarity with it. But they're very, obviously a spread team. And I'll be very interested to see how this team turns out. Now, 23 points is what I was giving in this game. That just seems nuts to me. Wait, hold on. It just occurred to me. No, and Washington's giving 3.5. Hold on. I misread that the first time. So Washington's giving 3.5. That seems odd. Okay, I
definitely got 3.5 points over Michigan State.
Yeah, but I so much believed that couldn't be right that I read it wrong.
That's right. I would have a Michigan State money line all day. There's no way Washington is in a point to compete against the likes of Michigan State at this moment. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that feels odd. Okay, so yes, hammer that one. I mean, this isn't a betting show, but yeah, that one. Nevada, Iowa. Iowa's actually 23-point favorite. That seems a bit generous.
I don't know if Iowa's even going to score 23 points, knowing them.
I mean, they don't have the most dynamic offense in the world. You are correct.
Yeah, they're a victim of nepotism. That's the issue. When you're Kirk Ferentz's son, you're either going to play O-line for the Patriots or you're going to be a staff member for Iowa. Like, your career is set forever. And that's why they've been they haven't met expectations for a long time. I mean, despite having a great year last year, I felt that they've underperformed as a program for many, many years.
Well, obviously, we shall see. Like I said, it's not the most dynamic offense. 23 points is a lot. And the over-under is 39. So that means that you're thinking that Iowa's going to win by 23, which means, I guess, it's 20. They'd have to. That means that, they'd have to, if they win by 23 and the over-under is 39. I mean, it seems like one of those things would be unlikely to happen. Either this would be more than 39 points scored, or you must truly believe that Nevada's going to score virtually no points, I guess. Maybe that's what they believe.
I don't know. A lot of my sources say that a lot of people do not believe in Nevada head coach Ken Wilson. There's a lot of trash been talked about him behind the scenes. People think that there's a reason why he hasn't been a head coach for a long time, and he only got the job because he was a protege of Chris Alt. So I don't know if that's true, like for it personally, but that's what I've been hearing behind the scenes. So we'll just have to wait and see.
All right. Well, one last game, and then we're going to have joined by a very special guest, Melon Williams, to talk about that Florida State game. So the last game that really interests me is SMU Maryland, and I have finally gotten used to Maryland being in the Big Ten, which freaked me out for a couple of years. Like I kept having to remind myself that Maryland is in the Big Ten, which just feels so weird.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I still thought they're in the ACC up to like 18 months ago. Like it is a trip to think that they're in the Big Ten.
It's a very strange thing because they're not culturally and obviously not geographically like the other schools in the Big Ten. So, Mike Loxley, though, is really building something. I think they cover the 3.5, but I think a lot of points are scored. I think even though 73 is a big number, I won't be shocked if the over ends up coming out of that game. Tulia is having a great beginning to this season. He seems to have cut down on some of the mistakes he used to make, and he's got talent. I mean, I think he has a stronger arm than his brother. Maybe not quite as polished mentally yet, but I think he's got a stronger arm, and he's probably about the same just as a pure athlete.
Yeah, so he's got some absolute dogs at the wide receiver position. Dante Demas Jr., Jacob Copeland from Florida, and quite frankly, I'm not saying they're going to win the Big Ten, but they're facing a Big Ten where the secondaries out there aren't as strong as in years past. So expect Maryland to put up some points on some teams that are going to raise some eyebrows, to say the least.
Yeah, and Rakim Jarrett is another guy I really like. They have, as you said, a tremendously loaded group of receivers. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be joined by our guest, Melon Williams.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build the cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gold Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder. Hashtag built for the wild.
So we have been joined by the one, the only, the Mellow My Man, Mellow Williams. And first of all, tell us, how did you became a Florida State fan? And then tell us about what you see coming up for them in this game.
First of all, fellas, thanks for having me. It feels good to be here talking some college football. I became a Seminoles fan at an early age from the Bobby Bowden era. Deion Sanders and those guys, Derrick Brooks, Charlie Ward, one of the best players ever to come through Florida State. Heisman winner, chose to go to the NBA. Was drafted by the New York Knicks. Peter Ward, those guys. Now, Jalen Ramsey. And Florida State is known as DBU, So being a kid, wanting to be Deion Sanders, that was something that was huge to me. So I took on Florida State from just the reputation. Bobby Bowden as a guy, he was a good guy. Always heard good things about him, So just always been a fan of Florida State and how they did things.
Okay, got it. So let's talk about this game now. This is a big game, at least in part because Florida State has, had a couple of years where they kind of wandered around in the wilderness. So tell me first of all, what will it take for them to win this game? And what are some of the key players that you think will have a role in the outcome of the game?
The key to this game for me is controlling the clock, controlling the tempo. I believe Florida State's best offense would be, or best defense would be offense by pounding the rock, controlling the clock, taking what the defense give them. But also on the defensive side of things, Florida State is going to be real key to stop Louisville's rush attack. That rush attack. They're one of the best with how they do with the zone stretch play. It creates a lot of things, from the naked boots to play actions, counters off the play actions, things of that nature. So Florida State's run defense will definitely be tested in their discipline.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned falling in love with the DBU. Of course, you'll get a fight from LSU and a few other schools on that one. But Ohio State lately has been trying to throw their hat in that ring, too. But did you also play that position? Did you play DB?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, I can't, actually literally shake your hand, but I'm an old safety, so it's good to have you here. So let's talk about let's talk about that, because it's always been difficult to play defensive back. The rules changes have made it darn near impossible. You really have to be incredibly talented to not give up big plays nowadays, because they don't want you to really hit receivers anymore. They are doing everything possible to protect quarterbacks. Quarterbacks now can now ground the ball without a penalty as long as they're outside the tackle box. Let's talk about the secondary of what you call DBU, and what will they have to do to not give up big plays in this particular game?
I believe that's going to be all on the play calling, defensive play calling. However, it's going to be staying patient, just doing your job. It's going to be for the DBs to do their job. Probably going to play a lot of zone, I believe, more than man. So it's going to be the jobs of the DBs just to do their job, stay in their assignment, stay within their assignment, play their lanes, and, and just stay patient, stay disciplined. I believe discipline is the key for both sides of the ball, for offense and defense.
Okay. And give me a couple of players that you are particularly watching in this game. Could be for either team, but you are spotlighting guys you're going to study, guys you want to see them show up who are the guys that you'll have your scout's eye, as I call it, on in this upcoming game?
The whole team. I mean, like, I believe this is a total team effort, honestly. Like, everyone, I believe, again, this is key for everyone to just do their job, even from the play calling, from the defensive coordinator. You know, but our linebackers, I believe, will, as a whole, as a linebacker core, they are going to be more important, more than anything, to be able to read and react. You know, Louisville does a great job of taking what the defense gives them, and finding the holes in the zone. So I believe, again, it'll be a total team effort.
Okay. Got it. And I'm going to open it up to my always, well, you're not familiar with my co-host, but he'll be taking it easy on you, I assume. So I'll open it up to my co-host, Brock Vieira, who'll have some questions for you as well.
Thank you, Bill. You know, Bill, you have such a warm and loving face. You continuously insult me with your beautiful words. With that being said, so Mello, obviously you're a Florida State fan. You have a lot of opinions on the team. Do you think Mike Norvell is the head coach for the future for the Seminoles?
I definitely do. I like Coach Norvell. I believe he's brought structure. I believe he's brought discipline. I believe he brought a sense of team, that no one is bigger than the team. And I believe he understands who he is in the program and with the football team. I don't believe he feel that no one is bigger than him as far as when it comes to the players, that he has to walk pins and needles around or anything like that. So I like him. It's been a great turnaround since he's been there. I believe the recruits are starting to see that again, and I like it for Florida State. Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. And then obviously we see with the top programs in Florida, Florida State, Florida, and then Miami, they're all going through overhauls right now at new head coaches. Do you believe that the current trajectory that Florida State is on will guide them to being the best team in the state of Florida? Or if not, what do you think they need to improve to be the best team in the state of Florida?
Getting the recruits is the main thing. Winning is the ultimate, the main thing. To make the recruits want to come. To be the best team in the state of Florida, that's a good question, because Miami, they're bouncing back slowly but surely. They've been getting it together. You got former players with the Hurricanes who's reaching back to the program and helping out, coaching, teaching, and things of that nature. And I like to see Florida State kind of do that as well, a little bit more. I believe that would help the program going forward as well, when they see their alum, former great players, national champions, Super Bowl champs come back and give back to the program.
Absolutely. So we talked about that term DBU for a long time. I mean, if I'm being honest, Florida State hasn't been DBU in a little bit of a while. Obviously, Asante Samuel Jr. is the exception to that standard. What besides recruiting, do you think that anything else needs to happen for Florida State to reclaim that title and be dominant in the defensive side of the field?
Definitely, I get what you're saying with that. The title will never go away. We're gonna always compete, or Florida State will always compete for that. LSU, they are definitely screaming, making a lot of noise when it comes to DBU. However, that Florida State did just beat 2 weeks ago, must I say. However, it's going to take guys like Jalen Ramsey. It's going to take the guys to just continue getting into the league. And again, I believe it boils down back to winning. Once the recruits see that Florida State is Florida State, and the DBs feel like they can have something to latch on to and jack about, it'll be right back.
Absolutely. I got two more questions for you. What is, you brought up a great point in Jalen Ramsey, and obviously Florida State does have some dogs in the NFL at the moment. Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., so on and so forth. Is there a player on this team that you see being that next great Florida State DB in the NFL?
Boy, that's big. I don't see it right now. I see potential with a couple players, but that's a big statement. Even though, like you said, they haven't been DBU as of late, what we would expect and what we would want. However, I believe Florida State will always get the guys that has potential to be that. But, that's one position that it's not easy to be considered one of the best of in football in general, especially Florida State.
Understood. My last question for you is, obviously that dude would have been Travis Hunter had he committed to Florida State instead of going to Jackson
Definitely.
State. When Norvell was hired, I always said for a long time they should have went with Deion Sanders over Mike Norvell. Do you have any statements on that comment?
I definitely wanted Deion back at Florida State. And I'm also open-minded about how things work. I'm not going to say that Deion wasn't properly prepared for that job. I definitely believe he could have done that job, and being in a position like that at Florida State, the best preparation is going through the motions. But when it comes to coaching, technique, what he could have done when it came to recruiting, to getting those recruits, Deion Sanders, there's no one that would be better than him at Florida State as of right now. But what he's doing at Jackson State, I love it. He's helping Jackson State, and not only Jackson State, he's helping the HBCU totally. He's helping the whole landscape of the HBCU landscape. He's starting to get the players. Other players is opening up as far as being willing to go to HBCUs and not so much of the blue blood schools. So eventually, I believe Deion probably will find his way back at Tallahassee. But I also believe this is helping him as well when it comes to just learning how to coach college football, the politics of college football, recruiting, learning the rules and things of that nature, because we already see that all eyes is on Deion and with NIL, so they're definitely waiting. I believe people is definitely waiting for him to slip up and see if they could come up with some type of violation against his program, especially with what he's doing at Jackson State. So I like it. I wanted him, but I had to put, fandom over reality.
True words have never been spoken. Fandom over reality. I feel that in my heart.
Thank
you. Okay. Last couple of things, and then we'll let you go back to having a life. Now,
hey, this is it.
So I said that 8-4 would be a solid year. I don't know what your expectations are. So take me through the rest of the season. What do you see happening, and where do you see Florida State ending up? Could they potentially win, if not the entire conference, maybe their half of the Atlantic Coast Conference?
The ACC is real. I like the ACC, especially with Clemson in there. NC State, Boston College. So there's some. Louisville. There's schools that Florida State will definitely have to beat in the next couple weeks. Let me see. It's Boston College and Wake Forest. Wake Forest is another program that's back on the come up. They're doing making great strides, I should say. Boston College is always a tough game for Florida State. So I believe in the next 2 weeks, depending on how the outcome of the game is tonight against Louisville, I believe they could definitely ride that momentum streak since beating LSU 2 weeks ago. And I definitely could agree with the 8-4 mark with Florida State finishing out the regular season. And will they make it to the bowl play? I don't believe it would be a New Year's Day bowl. Possibly, depending on how the year pans out. But I definitely could see them competing with Clemson to win the ACC, though.
Okay. And my final question, the quarterback situation. Obviously, they've cycled through several quarterbacks. They had Dylan Gabriel for a hot second. You can go back to,
Mackenzie Milton.
Right.
The other UCF QB from
right.
a lot in high school.
DeAndre Francois a little before that, but they've gone through a lot of quarterbacks. And then it seems like Jordan Travis was a guy that it took him a while to sort of fight his way to the top. One, do you think that he's the right guy for the job? And what do you think the future holds for him?
I do. They say good things come to those who wait, and the cream eventually rises to the top. I'm not saying he's, Charlie Ward or, some of the other quarterbacks Florida State have had, but I definitely believe he has what it takes to get the job done and to be patient and overcome the things that he had to come to get to this position, to be starting. Believe it says a lot about his character. It says a lot about his mental. And for me, when I'm looking at players and evaluating players, your head is a huge evaluation for me. You know, I would like my leader to be strong, be able to deal with adversity. And with the adversity he's had to deal with, I believe he's definitely up for the job and more than capable of doing the job.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to end on, or a final thought you want to leave us with before we give you back to those that have been waiting patiently to get more Melo Williams in their lives?
Like the babyface assassin said, the wordplay, I like it. I'm loving it.
Hey, you are, after all, Melo, my man.
Hey, I appreciate you, Bill. You know, it could be about anything, about Florida State, about college
It could be
football.
about Florida State, college football as a whole, football as a whole, but or if you have something deep and profound that's not football related, we'll take it. And then also tell people where they can find your work and follow you on social media.
Okay, I will take this brief moment, to speak about Brett Favre and his actions. That came out recent in the press, as far as taking donations or a check from the welfare down in the state of Mississippi, the health. So I'm assuming probably the Department of Health and Human Services or something like that. So, you know, for me and Brett Favre, and with the latest in the Brett Favre sagas, you know, we have to go back to the late 90s. Brett Favre was, you know, it is what it is. He said that he got addicted to pain pills from playing, you know, in the NFL, the rigors of the NFL. You know, during this time, you know, he won MVP, a Super Bowl, you know, was highly regarded, you know, as a face of the NFL at that time, and somewhat still been a face of the NFL. And then we found out when he was traded or signed with the Jets, he was sending inappropriate pictures to other staff members, to a staff lady, someone that was on the staff somewhere along with the Jets organization. And then this, you know, so it's like, just to use Colin Kaepernick as an example, you know, Colin Kaepernick has been, you know, just name has been rained through the mud, dragged. I mean, I've heard some of the most outlandish things said about Colin Kaepernick for doing something that he has a right to do, that we all have a right to do. You know, so for someone like Brett Favre, who's been highly regarded in sports, in the NFL, Wisconsin, the Packers, the state of Mississippi, you know, to see all these things that have happened in his past, and with this latest thing, taking a check to have a facility built for his daughter to play volleyball while she was in college. It's time for the NFL to take a stand against Brett Favre. I mean, guys have been, T.O., for example, has been, you know, ridiculed, should have been in the Hall of Fame as a first-time ballot, I believe. But, you know, it's guys that have been, you know, just ostracized and badmouthed for their beliefs or for other people's beliefs and judgment about them. And then for a guy like Brett Favre to be intentionally doing these things and still not somewhat receiving half of the backlash that Colin Kaepernick, T.O., and others have received is disturbing. Personally, I feel at this point Brett Favre should be removed from the Hall of Fame, because it's not like you're out committing felonies. You're doing different things of that nature with intent of doing that. So I'll be touching on that, talking about that a little bit more. You can find me at Nuts and Bolts Sports, at Melo Williams, at _Melo Williams on Twitter or IG.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for touching upon that. And yeah, when a program, which is TANF, temporary aid for needy families, it's for the poorest of the poor, and instead it's going to a multimillionaire so that he can build. And here's the greatest irony: his daughter ends up transferring, right? So I wish I were making it up, but I'm not. She transferred. So there's so many layers to that onion, and we don't have time to peel them all. But thank you so much for joining us, Mello. You will be back, and of course, I know you got a Wisconsin shirt on, so we'll talk some Big Ten, I guess, in the next time you come on. Yeah, man of many teams. But yes, thank you so much, Mr. Mello Williams. Please, you aren't following him. Once again, @_ Mello Williams. Mello with just one L and one O and no W. Williams. Well, W and Williams, but not one in the word Mello. But yes, he is definitely someone you should check out. His work is great, and he's a fantastic follower.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Mel.
Very much enjoyed having you. And we'll see you again soon, I promise.
Most definitely.
So now we will transition to some under-the-radar teams and under-the-radar players as we take a look at the rest of week 3, and then we'll close this sucker out. So I'm going to talk about, you mentioned obviously sort of the biggest and the most celebrated game in the Big 12 schedule, at least for this week, being Oklahoma, Nebraska, despite the fact it's probably not going to be terribly close. A game that I think will be more interesting and closer, well, 2 games, in fact, I think will be more interesting and closer. One involves a ranked team in Texas. Will Texas do what Texas has sometimes done in the past, play really, really well, have an emotional loss to a really good ranked team, and then face an unranked team and either struggle and gut out a win there or gut out a loss? UTSA is better than people think, and Texas just came off this huge almost win. So will Texas be riding, a little high, or will they be a little bit overlooking Texas San Antonio? I will find out very soon. Texas San Antonio has a really underrated quarterback in Frank Harris, who I think is talented. They still have good players. Maybe not a Tariq Woolen type player on defense, but they have talented players on defense. And there's still an offense that can make plays. And once again, a not at all sexy game. But Kansas State and Tulane is another sort of under-the-radar matchup for 2 reasons. I think more than 2 reasons. Michael Pratt of Tulane is one of the better quarterbacks that nobody ever talks about. And the big question is, can they protect him? If they can keep him clean against Kansas State, another team that isn't the most dynamic scoring team, though they do have Deuce Vaughn, who I love, but he's sort of the shooting match. Like, he's kind of the deal for them. Deuce Vaughn catching the ball, Deuce Vaughn running the ball. He doesn't throw the ball much, I don't think, but he does everything else, right? He catches the ball, he runs the ball. He's been used in the past in the special teams. I think they pulled him off because of how important he is to them on offense. But if Deuce Vaughn is somehow, not stopped, but slowed, and Michael Pratt stays clean, that could be a scary game for Kansas State. And then I'll throw out another Big 12 versus, at least thus far, unranked team, Kansas and Houston. Now, Kansas is not, a traditional powerhouse in football like they are in basketball. But I do think that Lance Leipold, 1, is the right guy for this job. He has built programs from, to use a construction term, from the studs, right? From gut rehab, from tearing it down to just the frame left and building it back up. He's done that. He's done that well. And I think he's going to eventually build a winner there in Kansas. But Houston is, once again, another tough matchup because they can score. They can score on really good teams. And we'll find out if Kansas is one of those. Give me some of your under-the-radar players, teams, etc.
Well, you basically just hit majority of them on the head, so I can talk about them in a second. I agree, and I wrote an article maybe last year that said why Texas should fire Steve Sarkisian. And basically what I wrote in that is that Steve Sarkisian melts in the 3rd quarter. And I still feel justified in that statement. UTSA does have a very good passing attack, a phenomenal coaching staff, and of course they came off a very emotional loss to Houston a couple weeks ago. But at the same time, last year's UTSA team was one of the best in the nation. So that's a game I'm looking out for. I do think Texas wins that game as well. A player that I have just fallen in love with, they're not playing anybody. I think they're playing Toledo Akron.
I think you're right with
lower tier MAC team, but Tennessee Volunteers. Cedric Tillman He's a receiver that has been growing on me for a long time. And last game against Pitt, when the light shined brightest, he went off. 9 receptions, 162 yards, 1 touchdown. That touchdown coming in that overtime period to seal the game for Tennessee. He's a guy that I really think a lot of people have to keep a lot of eyes on in this very crowded wide receiver class. We talk about the Jordan Addisons. We talk about the Jackson Smith and Jimbas. You talk about the Keyshawn Bouttes. You know who's been really showing out? Cedric Tillman. Big guy to watch out as we approach this SEC cycle. And that's a guy I'm going to be keeping my eyes on for a lot throughout the season. Kansas State, Tulane, I don't have that same fear that you do for Kansas State. I think they're too well coached. I think Deuce Vaughn's too much of a killer. I love Deuce Vaughn as well. And I see them going comfortably to a win, but I do understand where you're coming from. They have an absolute stud at quarterback. Saw him last year, love him. If it's the same guy I'm thinking of that he balled out against Oklahoma, I expect him to have a very, very good college career. And going back to a game I said earlier, Georgia, South Carolina. I still think that the Gamecocks are going to put up a really strong fight. I'm not the biggest Spencer Rattler believer. I just love Shane Beamer and what he's doing. In a way, he kind of reminds me of Lance Leopold, rebuilding a once decent program from absolute ashes. Obviously, it wasn't as bad as Kansas and Les Miles, but they're doing a lot of things and putting their teams at a lot of good positions. And I expect this weekend to be a very big show out for both Kansas and for South Carolina. Going to Kansas real quick before we wrap up. I believe they just extended Leopold for like another 3 or 4 years. Well done to Kansas. Great win against West Virginia last week. And if you're a Kansas sports fan or a Kansas Jayhawks fan, you got to be grinning ear to ear. Your football team is finally having some momentum again. Your basketball team just won the NCAA championship. Great things are happening over there, and I just a great time to be a Kansas Jayhawk.
I'll give you a couple more games that I think are interesting, and then we, as you said, we will close this sucker out. And obviously, closer to your neck of the woods, close-ish, I guess. We mentioned Fresno State USC before. San Diego State Utah is another game that I think could be. I mean, I won't use the term trap game because once again, Utah is extremely well coached. I don't think they'll take San Diego State lightly at all. But San Diego State is a team that beats people. You know, they every year they get somebody. Somebody gets got every year by them. And I don't think it'll be Utah, but I think that game will be closer than some people realize. San Diego State, as always, has some good players on defense. Do you still have Tavai, that terrific nose tackle? If they do, they used to have this enormous kid. What was his first name? Something Tavai.
Well, Justice Tavai from Hawaii transferred there this year, and he plays nose tackle.
Okay, well, that's a guy that I like, and I've always liked, and I continue to like. You know, and I think that he'll end up being good. Other people that I'm looking forward to seeing, I think that did we mention the SMU? We mentioned SMU, Maryland, right? Yeah, so that's probably about it. Let's see, and then
great games. I just don't see Utah losing to San Diego State twice in a row. And I think Tavion Thomas is set to run all. It's not the same SDSU team, and I think Tavion Thomas is going to run all over them. Unlike last year, Cam Rising will be the starting quarterback for the whole game. It's a Charlie Brewer, getting pulled and then transferring next day.
Right.
So I think Utah wins comfortably, personally.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, I like I said, I do think they'll win. I just think it'll be closer than some people think. That's all I'm thinking. Okay, one last game.
Aztec hater. I think they're going to get blown out.
One last game I wanted to touch on is Notre Dame, Colorado. Notre Dame obviously is licking its wounds coming off a throttling by the Marshall Thundering Herd, where shout out to fellow Virginia Beach native, Kalen Laybourne, ran all over them for 163 yards, 757 football in the house. And it wasn't even a terribly close game. Marshall was better on both sides of the ball pretty much from beginning to end. It wasn't like there was some sort of fluke or some sort of surprise at the end. They were just better all the way through. Cal, I mean, it sounds funny to say that. Cal isn't quite as dangerous to them as Marshall. It sounds funny saying that, but Marshall simply, I think, has more guys who can just like Laybourne and guys like that who can just make big plays without, something else happening. Like they can make a big play happen. I don't know if Cal has many guys who can just make big plays happen. I think they have to scheme them up. But what do you see happening with Notre Dame and Cal before we close this one?
So I think Notre Dame suffered from a complete emotional letdown after that Ohio State game. And I think they're going to beat the living hell out of Cal, if I'm being honest. I'm not one of those Marcus Freeman haters that wants to fire him after 2 days. I want to fire Brian Kelly as soon as he got hired there, and I still feel justified in that answer. I think everyone's talking about, Marcus Freeman's not going to be successful because he's a player's coach. He relates to his players too much. That's a load of bull.
Thank you. Well done. Yes.
Yeah.
Nice save there.
Yeah, right. I'm not gonna say the other part, but that's the worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah, no, being a CEO is definitely gonna make you successful as a coach. That's why Brian Kelly had tremendous success in the college football playoff and on New Year's Six bowl games. Right? You look at the best programs in the country; they have coaches that relate and bond with their players on a fairly consistent basis. Nick Saban, everyone talks about their love for him. They talk about him being being a hard man, but a man that will love you and take care of you and nurture you. Same thing with Kirby Smart. Same thing with Dabo Swinney. A lot of people have great things to say about them as coaches. Brian Kelly wasn't that dude. You know who is that dude? Marcus Freeman. I expect them to come out strong. I expect them to put up a dominating performance. I expect Michael Merritt to reestablish himself as TE1 in this draft class. And quite frankly, no offense to Justin Wilcox and that Cal Golden Bears team, they've just been mediocre for so long that I don't see them putting up too much of a fight against this Fighting Irish team. I think the Fighting Irish are going to dominate a lot of scrimmage. I think they're going to run the ball hard, and I think they're going to get a lot of yards on the Cal Golden Bears, and thus coast their way to a very easy victory in Buckner's absence.
Would you like to hit the people with a quick moment of UNLV analysis, since I know you have some insight to the program?
Absolutely. They played North Texas this week, a big game for the Rebels program and Marcus Arroyo in general. It really will set the tone for the rest of the season. For a long time, they've almost been like the Nebraska of the West, where they're one play or one possession away from winning a game, but unfortunately they can't get it done. Really great win week 1. A close loss to Cal on the road in week 2 shows that the continuation of this, the progress of this program keeps heading forward. I expect a dominant performance from quarterback Doug Brumfield, a tall left-hander, athletic quarterback from UNLV. I expect him to ball out. There's some really good wide receivers on that UNLV team as well. They did a really great job in recruiting in the transfer portal. So expect them to throw the ball around a lot, get some good yardage through the air, and have a fairly comfortable, I would say, 35-21 win over North Texas.
Okay.
A rematch of the 2014 Heart of Dallas Bowl, by the way.
There you go. That's the analysis people come here for. You are correct, though. That is indeed true. That is what that is. We're going to have a quick message from one of our sponsors, and then we'll have our final thoughts.
This commercial is brought to you by TrueBrain. Say hello to TrueBrain. We're not magicians. We're not going to turn you into a rocket scientist, unless you're already a rocket scientist. We're not big pharma, and our products are custom made to boost mental output. We empower people to do their best thinking.
Okay. So I guess I'll let you go first. What are your final thoughts? It could obviously be related to week 3 in NCAA, football in general, or something else.
All right, so Miller kind of touched upon it, and I want to touch upon Brett Favre real quick. NFL legend, college football legend, just legend all across the football field. What he did was absolutely unacceptable and almost unforgivable. Now, Chan Sharp hit it on the head. Mississippi is the poorest state in the union. Not only did you take from the poorest state, you took from the poorest of the poor in the poorest state of the union. That is something that is absolutely irreprehensible, to say the least, and yet we're not talking about it. So this is a message to any young athlete out there. Actions speak louder than words, but image speaks louder than actions. No matter what happens to Brett Favre, he will never lose the great mantle for which his career has sat upon. Whereas T.O. could never really reach that mantle of the Hall of Fame because of his off-the-field issues, even though stealing money from people on welfare and whatever T.O. did in his off-the-field issues aren't even remotely close in the same ballpark. it is what it is. And there's a double standard in this country when it comes to how you look, how you act, and how you present yourself. Brett Favre will always get those opportunities to mess up and do horrible things, and nobody will care, whereas other players may not have that opportunities. So what I say to the young men watching this show is, be smart. Don't put yourself in bad positions. If there's anything that seems to go sideways, remove yourself. Because all it takes is one moment, 1 second in time to ruin a life's work. So stay smart, stay safe, and be the best young men you can be.
Okay. One more very important message from the sponsor. I'll hit you with my final thoughts, and then we will wrap this page.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. Hashtag only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
SWAC football, HBCU football, was touched upon briefly earlier, and for a long time, it was the pinnacle of where any black football player could hope to play, because at one point, things like the SEC and Big 12 or Big 8, as it would have been in those days, were largely closed. I mean, the Big 8 recruited black athletes. Some of the schools, the northern schools of the Big 8, like Nebraska, have been recruiting black players going back to 1901. But the more southern schools only very recently, and then obviously like Texas and things like that, Julius Whitaker, coming there. But I mean, in my lifetime, since I've been watching football, football is desegregated. I've watched it happen, and there are great things to be said about that because of the choices and opportunities. But it also was a big talent drain from MEAC, the SWAC, the SIAC, CIAA. And so now with the attention and the sudden sort of rediscovery for some people of the SWAC, Alcorn State's playing McNeese State. McNeese State is a really good FCS program. Incarnate Word is very quickly becoming an absolute juggernaut. They're playing Prairie View A&M. Oklahoma State, in a money game, is playing Arkansas Pine Bluff. Texas Southern versus Southern U. Austin Peay is another really good FCS program, is playing Alabama A&M. But the spotlight game in the SWAC is Jackson State and Grambling. And for years, that was one of those games that would sort of set up to decide, which one of those teams would get to play for the conference championship, which one of those teams would be, seen as one of the kings of the mountain. It was sort of Jackson State, Grambling, Southern for a very long time. And now you've seen, Prairie View A&M won the conference not too long ago. So now it's a little more diverse than it used to be. Alcorn State's been good recently. I'll be very interested to see if the SWAC can take advantage of this newfound or rediscovered maybe attention that they're now receiving, not entirely, but largely because obviously what we talked about with Deion Sanders. And I'm hoping that this is not a temporary thing. I'm hoping this turns out to be a long-term thing. And before we go, why don't you enjoy a little bit of this?
Pickup is a fan engagement platform that aims to build communities and turn the biggest headlines in sports into free-to-play props while rewarding fans for their hot sports takes. You've likely seen their props on Nuts and Bolts Sports and some of your other favorite online publishers and leagues like USA Today, NASCAR, Flow Sports, and others. Simply make your pick on the Pickup prop and verify your pick by entering your phone number, which you will use to track your picks. Accumulate points and exchange for prizes in their marketplace. Their merch ranges from Fanatics gift cards, cross nets just in time for summer, dugout mugs, and more. Make your picks ahead of the draft now.
Once again, on behalf of Nuts and Bolts Sports, I am Bill Carroll. I have the great pleasure of writing for and hosting No Huddle Necessary, which comes on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Where we also occasionally get to see Brock Vieira join us and turn on that verbal blowtorch that is his mouth and set fire to people's careers and livelihoods. But this is, like I said, the great joy of my week. I would do this every day if I could. Once again, I thank you so much for your time and your attention. On behalf of Brock Vieira and Bill Carroll, we are OUT out.